Thank you so much, Margot. Let's give another round of applause for Margot as this incredible MC. Oh, stop it, stop it. I don't have my guitar with me. I'm so sorry. It's a bit of a lug from Australia, but welcome. Womanjika kia ora, aya, bienvenida, everyone. I am so excited to be with you here from all the way from Australia to talk to you about how to reinvigorate an inactive community. And what an absolute honour to also close the club stage for CMX Summit Shine. Very excited. Yeah, woohoo! And down under in Australia, we have a ritual where we usually start a lot of presentations and workshops with something that's called an acknowledgement of country. Has anyone not heard of an acknowledgement of country? Not sure what we're talking about? Okay, a couple people. Well, an acknowledgement of country really is done before a big workshop or perhaps an assembly in Australia, and it's something that we do to play our part in reconciliation for the Indigenous populations. And so to do an acknowledgement of country, I would like to take a moment, a deep breath, if you will, to really, on behalf of all of us, acknowledge the traditional owners of this land. Where we are today, I'd like to pay our respects on behalf of everyone here to acknowledge the traditional custodians and their elders past and present, to really play our part in reconciliation and acknowledging the rich connection that they have to this beautiful country, this beautiful community and culture. And that is an acknowledgement of country. It's really a short and simple reminder that we can all play our part in acknowledging the incredible traditional owners of this land. And something that I would also like to acknowledge is the purpose. Like, why the hell are we all gathering here today? And so really the reason why I wanted to share this information about how to reinvigorate an inactive community with you is because whether if you have a very highly engaged community, kudos to you, I would like to share with you the signs and reasons about how to prevent inactivity in your community. And as well, perhaps if you're on the other side of the spectrum and you're like, oh, there's like not a lot of activity going on in my community, I'd love to give you some practical insights and some inspirations about what you can do to reinvigorate that community. Really, the crux of what we're talking about is engagement, which is paramount to any kind of community. So how this is going to work, we're going to start with a check-in, which is a ritual that we do here at the Community Collective. I've got one of our members here at the front, Sasmini, which is really exciting. And then I'm going to share a little bit about my story and why the hell am I up here on this stage sharing with you my perspectives. We're going to dive into the key signs of an inactive community to be aware of, to really play a part in that prevention. And we're also going to look at the reasons for why this might be happening. We're going to dive into some really practical takeaways. I want you to actually just leave with like a little bit of a roadmap and an action plan and some actual tactics that you can implement and use right away. Then we're going to close, we're going to celebrate, we're going to have a dance party. It's going to be the end of CMX Summit, and we're just going to have a really, really good time. And as well, throughout all of this talk, I'm going to share with you some incredible communities that I've observed in Australia, but all around the world. And I've also spoken to every single one of them to get their permission to share their story on their behalf. So should we dive in? Yeah, okay. Thank you. So a check-in, really the purpose of a check-in is just to get a bit of a read of the room. A value that I have is connecting with everyone in this room before sharing content. So I'd love to hear on a scale of 0 to 5, how are your energy levels today? So 5 is like, I am so energetic, like, woohoo. 0 is like, oh, I'm not feeling. Raise your hand, give us a 5 or a 0 or a 4 or a 3. Got some 5s over here, amazing. You can high five the person next to you. We've got a peace out, got a couple 2s. Okay, energy levels are varying, which is totally fine. Love this white slide, fabulous. I think they got some low energy levels on this slide here, but really I hope that you either increase your energy levels or perhaps if you're a 5, you can vibe the person next to you. Then I'd love to get a raise of hands. Do you manage a community? Anyone who manages a community? Okay, a lot of people. Awesome. You're at the right place. You can keep your hand raised. And if you have a community, I'd love to hear, out of 5, how would you rate the engagement levels of your community? 5 is like engagement is strong, members are posting and engaging. 0, like rock on. 0 is like, oh my God, there's like a lot of engagement. Okay, we got some 3s, some 5s. We got a couple of 5s. Do you want to come run this workshop? No, it's all good. It's all good. Okay, well, my aim for this talk is to help you understand, if you're a 5, the prevention of that inactivity, and if you're below a 5, to really have those key takeaways. And if you are not managing a community, I hope to just give you the information to help someone else on their way. So a little bit about my story and why I'm here from Australia. I've really found myself at the intersection of helping people build startups over the past 6 years, and as well as building communities. So I've held a community building role at a range of different organizations, and one of them is SisterWorks. This was a not-for-profit really designed to helping asylum seeker women become financially independent by building their own businesses when they migrated to Australia. I joined RMIT Activator, which was a university accelerator program which helps students, staff and alumni really help students build new startup communities. And so we ran various accelerator programs. We had a 3-level co-working space that we managed. And really we helped these students, staff and alumni to really innovate within the university. I was a part of the Startup Network, which is one of Australia's largest startup communities. And really they have a range of different memberships that would help founders, either if they just had an idea in the shower and they wanted to learn how to start, all the way up to the scale-up founders who were building million-dollar companies and really pioneering in the Australian startup space. And as well, I've been involved in co-working spaces, building community in person. It's one of my favorite ways to build community. And really, Happy Spaces is a local co-working space in where I live, which is a small surf town called Torquay, about an hour and a half from Melbourne. So over my time building a lot of different types of communities, I've observed and learned a lot of things that work really well and perhaps not so well. And along this way, I realized that being a community builder can be one of the most rewarding experiences of your life, but it can also be extremely challenging. It can be really confusing. It can be straight out lonely, as this strange paradox where you're surrounded by all these people but have no one to turn to. Throw in a pandemic, and Melbourne was the most locked down city in the world. We had over hundreds of days of stage 4 lockdown with 5K radiuses, curfew, could only leave 1 hour a day, you had to walk, you couldn't sit on a park bench. It was really intense in Melbourne. And so, of course, you can understand that a lot of founders had struggles with their businesses, either shutting up shop or they were going absolutely bonkers, and the growth, they couldn't keep up with it. And as a result, they lent on the community managers for support. They needed help, of course, just like many other people in the world did at that time. But when the community builders had this extreme pressure in Melbourne and the pandemic, the lockdowns, they were like, oh, where's my support? Like, who am I like leaning on? And there was a lot of great groups at the time, but it was very niche. Like, we were building community in the startup space in a lockdown city in Melbourne. And so I jumped on the phone and I called over 50 different community builders, and I was asking them, like, what are you struggling with? Where do you go to get support? And how can we help each other? And we created a meetup. This is Emma, who joined our first meetup in June 2021 in between the 4th and 5th Melbourne lockdowns. And we bonded together to actually help each other build engaged communities in the startup space. And it turned out there were a lot of us. This is how the Community Collective went viral. We had hundreds of community builders in the startup space join in a matter of months, predominantly finding us through word of mouth. Myself and my 2 co-founders, Melia Rayner and Jala Alex, started running these meetups monthly. We pivoted them online to reach more people. And in the middle of last year, I quit my full-time job. I registered the Community Collective as a company to provide more support and impact for these people. And so today, our mission at the Community Collective is to help businesses in the startup space build engaged communities. And we do that through an 8-week community cohort program, recruitment, got to help people get jobs, and also consulting. And the free meetup community still runs today. And so these are some photos of our members doing some good things in Australia. And really, this is how the Community Collective began. And this is how I began my own journey of being a founder. It was never my intention to build a business and be a founder. It's really hard sometimes. but it's really rewarding. And so what I want to share with you today is, give you this context to understand where my experiences have come from and to share with you what incredible community builders are doing all over the world. And so let's please start with a shared understanding of the key signs. And I know this might be really 101 and obvious, but I want to make sure that we're all on the same page to understand, what are the key signs to look out for in order to prevent a community becoming inactive, but also if it's happening, just to kind of have that checklist. You're like, oh God, oh yeah, that one. So let's jump in. So of course, low engagement. If you have witnessed low engagement in your community, this is a key sign. And something that I learned from Jenny Weigel at jenny.community, she's just here at the front actually, is really to remember that rule of thumb of engagement, which is not all 100% of your members are going to engage in your community 100% of the time. Remember that rule of thumb, which is the 99-1 rule of thumb, which basically means that 1% of your community are going to be those top contributors creating the majority of the content and engagement in your community, which is great. But 9% of those are probably active contributors as well, doing the good deeds. And then 90% of your community are probably those that are observers, consumers, perhaps lurkers. You've heard of that term. And that's okay. We don't need every single person in our community engaging every minute of the day for the rest of their lives. That's not what we're about here. So the key sign to look out for here is if you have the majority of your members disengaging, 90%, that's expected. But if you kind of don't have that 1 or 9% that are contributing at all and you're the one making all the engagement, that's the sign to look out for. Minimal attendance. We've all had that worst nightmare if you throw a birthday party and no one comes. Obviously, if no one shows up to your events and your offerings, then that's a sign to look out for disengagement. Thinking about constructive feedback. This is such a gift. One of the values of the Community Collective is that feedback is a gift when it is delivered in a concise, constructive, and kind manner. So I like to think of community builders as wearing Velcro suits. Not physical Velcro suits, it's an analogy. So basically picture yourself wearing a Velcro suit, and if you're a community builder, you're gonna have lots of feedback thrown at you. But, and all this feedback is gonna stick. And at the end of the day, you're gonna have to pull off the ones that's that's not really relevant. Okay, designing a pool party is not that relevant. Okay, getting helicopters to the conference, not that relevant. But some of the feedback is gonna stick. And the ones that are the repetitive, concise feedback that is sharing perhaps the value that they're not gaining in your community is the sign to look out for. The slide that's not showing anything is members leaving. So if you have a lot of members who are leaving your community at probably more of a higher rate than usual, that is obviously a key sign to look out for. If you have high rates of churn, members joining and leaving very quickly, that's a key sign. Thinking about lack of retention. Perhaps you might have a lot of people attending your events and offerings, which is great, but are they coming back? Are they actually coming back and bringing new people along with them? Because that is also a key sign. Which brings me to talk about lack of referrals. I would strongly applaud you to have a look at how are people joining your community? Are they joining through LinkedIn, social media, newsletters? And what percentage of those new members are from referrals? Because hearing that your existing members are talking about your community is a great sign. But on the flip side, if no one's doing that, that's a sign to look out for. Okay, second last one, stay with me, is slow growth. Of course, having an off month, perhaps around Christmas, if members aren't joining the community, that's cool. But the sign to look out for here is if you have this consistent slow growth and it is declining with the new amount of new members that are joining. Crickets. So this is an analogy. Don't worry, it's not like a plague of crickets infiltrating your community. This is really about hearing crickets on the inside and the outside of your community. So say if you do a big launch and you want people to join and you just hear crickets, and perhaps you're on the inside of your community and you're sharing all this new content, new event series, and you just hear crickets, that is the key sign to look out for. It's kind of the silence, the non-engagement on both sides. And so the key takeaway from these key signs is really, if you have one of these signs in your community, that's cool. I'd love to see a raise of hands. Have you witnessed just one of these key signs in your community at all? Yeah, we're not alone. There's a lot of people, and that's totally fine. But it's the dangerous combination of this delicious cocktail of all of these signs coming together that is the red flag to look out for. So let's jump into reasons. Like, why on earth would anyone be leaving our community? You know, we really want to understand why. So in that prevention, you can make sure that these reasons don't come up. And perhaps if you're experiencing more of these signs, you're like, okay, I have a bit of clarity, and you can understand the problem more deeply. Offerings. You want to have a look at, is your community offering benefits in a way that actually delivers value to your members? So what I mean by that is, for example, you might just only run a monthly webinar in your community, which is great, but perhaps your members want to connect in more intimate settings in one-on-one. So perhaps you need to diversify the offerings because there aren't enough benefits for members. So you could have one-on-one coaching, events, in person, online, etc. The second one is the team. What I've observed is occasionally members would leave or disengage in a community as a result of two things. One is, say you hire a new community manager and that just, for whatever reason, it just didn't work out. It wasn't aligned. People aren't vibing with this new team member, and perhaps members would disengage. Or on the flip side, if you've had an incredible community builder, like leading the charge in this community, perhaps they've just left. And a lot of members are like, I'm going to follow them and head out somewhere else. Another reason is the vision. You know, is the vision of the business aligned with the member vision that they have for their community? Or are you going in like completely different ways? You know, realign to, are the members feeling like they are excited about where the community vision is taking them? Member fit. I was chatting to someone about this time last year in Melbourne, and I said, who's your community for? She's like, oh, it's a legal tech community. I was like, great. Who joined? She said, everyone. I was like, oh, God. You know, communities are inclusive. I am a big supporter of being inclusive and diverse, but they are also exclusive by design. You know, the more niche that your community is with who you serve and having adequate ways to join the community means that members are going to likely feel more affiliated and connected with the members and want to stick around. Tech tools, you've got to make sure you're connecting in the right way with technology. Perhaps your members hate Facebook groups, but that's the only way to connect with the community. Or for example, in our community cohort, we have a lot of members in Nigeria, and they have frequent power outages. They don't really have access to laptops as much, so I need to make sure that our tech tools have mobile applications so that they are it lowers the barriers to entry. Scheduling, can they even join? If you're running a lawyer community and everything's at night, but they're predominantly working until 9 p.m., you know, that could be a barrier to entry and a reason as to why they're not engaging in the first place. So this notion of always on is something that I've observed with communities that would have a membership model, and this doesn't apply to all communities. I would encourage you to pick and choose the ones that feel relevant for you. But what I've observed is that members can disengage slightly if there's no accountability or drive or scarcity to actually make value of everything that you're offering. So for example, you could have this always on membership where members can join any day, they can go to a meetup every single week. They're like, I'll get to it. Maybe they won't. But the more that you have scarcity and actually drive members to make use of what you're doing, the better accountability that humans will have. Bad eggs. Okay. We make a lot of pavlovas in Australia, and I've had some bad eggs, but that's not what we're talking about. So we're talking about basically members who join the community that probably weren't the right fit. I'd love to see a raise of hands. Has anyone ever had a member in their community that has violated community guidelines, made another member feel, whoa, this is like a majority of the room. So this can be really tough on engagement for the rest of the members, because if they feel inadequate or a bit daunted from this other person, that can permeate the whole vibe of a community. So as community builders, I would really encourage you to keep an eye on who is joining, and then if members have joined, if they're still the right fit. Okay, action plan. I want to make this really practical. So this is like the roadmap to go to basically what should you do? If you've noticed some of these signs, you're kind of resonating with some of these reasons, what do we do now? And so I'm going to share with you a range of different steps that you can take to address this type of situation in your community. But it will also be up to you to really recognize which strategies and tactics will be most relevant, because not all of them will apply for every single community. So I would really encourage you to take some away, share them with your team and your members, and then make those decisions to move forward. Sounds good? Cool. I would strongly encourage you to start with talking to your members. If you have noticed a really high level, like a drop of engagement in your community, you've got to find out why. And you've got to go talk to some people, ideally who are in your community. So do something that Asami did. Picture there's a beautiful face of Asami here. She's the founder of Shapes and Sounds in Australia. And Asami noticed a drop in engagement in her community. And she went out and basically spent a lot of time talking with her members. She went out for coffee, she got on the phone, she created an interview guide and asked them the same series of questions. She scribed all the answers and did a thematic analysis and basically came away with a lot of insights as to why members were potentially not engaging and to what they would like to see more of. This next element is talking about surveys, which is really thinking about, okay, if we've got the qualitative data, what is the quantitative data that we need? So going out and really creating these broad surveys that would have 5 to 7 questions that you can ask your members to make sure that you're also getting a voice of the majority of the community. Once you have the surveys, you've got to do some research, you know? I would encourage 2 types of research. There's a lot more, but the 2 I would focus on is really looking at, okay, what are the trends have we seen in this community over a period of time? You know, has like low engagement happened in the past years? Like, is this a current theme that keeps reoccurring? And as well, I would research what other communities are doing. You know, bond together, there are some incredible people in this room. So I would encourage you to talk to each other and understand how you have also approached this in the past. This next announcement is, I love these slides. Oh God, they're beautiful. So the next element that I would really applaud you to take on is to announce that you are doing something to the community. Like, I really believe in like radical transparency. Include your members on the ride for this. You know, just last month, I've actually noticed a drop in engagement in our own community, in our free meetup community. I think that's my assumption is because we've basically focused on the community cohort program, but I wanted to find out. So I sent an announcement to our members and I said, hey, we've noticed a drop in engagement and we'd love to figure out why. You know, we're going to be doing these interviews, we're going to do these surveys, and I'm going to be speaking to all of you, and I want to understand about what we can do together. Because if you drop the barriers and involve them in the process, they're going to be more likely to get involved. The next one is come and look at your strategy, you know, bond together with your team and understand, are we heading in the right direction? You also want to make sure that you're thinking like Stephen Covey did, which is begin with the end in mind. You need to make sure that the business is wanting to take the community in the direction that the members also want to take, because that is really aligning and addressing if members want to go one way with the community, but the business wants to go the other way with the community. We've got to make sure we kind of get on the same page here. Third last element in this section, which is feedback. You know, I said feedback is a gift, and we need to make sure that we are gaining more feedback from our members. So, Paz, how is this different from interviews and surveys? Well, I can tell you. Really, feedback is about understanding the interviews, getting the data through the surveys, doing your research, announcing to the community, and reviewing your strategy, and then coming up with those next steps. So you might come up with suggested offerings. You're like, okay, I got this idea, and this idea. Go back to your community, co-create the offerings together and get their feedback on the exact design. This is something that we did at Happy Spaces, where we brought together different ideas of how to re-engage a lot of members. And they were like, I love BYO Lunch Tuesdays. That is by far better than any of the other ideas you had. We were like, great, we're going to do that, BYO Lunch Tuesdays, which stands for Bring Your Own Lunch. Just FYI. Data and insights. You know, we want to make sure that we're really making data-driven, informed decisions. So once you have gotten all your interviews and the surveys and you've done all this beautiful work to really understand the problem and where you can go next, I would strongly encourage you to make sure that the data is meaningful. Start doing thematic analysis, really dig into those numbers and make sure that you can pull out key insights to make sure that your input is worthwhile. Okay, if you're going to listen to 5 seconds of this whole talk, listen to me right now. I hope you're listening the whole way, but right now is really important because community builders, we can get pulled in all different types of directions. We can take on a lot. There can be a lot of things that are like, this is community. And you're like, is it? Is that in my job description? It is now. So I want you to remember who, not how. I read this incredible book, which is called Who, Not How, and it basically encourages you to, instead of asking yourself, how am I going to do all these interviews? How am I going to conduct this research? How am I going to do this announcement? You ask yourself, who can help me do these interviews? Who can help me do this research? Who has done this before that I can learn from to really help me on our way? Because when you realize that you can ask for help at any point in your journey, the easier it's going to get. We've made it to the last section of this talk before we close the club stage. And this is the tactics. So the roadmap is the where, the tactics are the how. Number 1, co-creation is one of the best tactics that I have seen to re-engage and also deepen engagement with members. A community that does this extremely well is Butter. Has anyone heard of Butter? Not the delicious dairy spread. Okay, well, if you haven't heard of Butter, you can buy some at Coles. That's an Australian supermarket, but you can find out about Butter because it is an online tool for interactive sessions. It's kind of like Zoom, but just more interactive. And really, their head of community, Anna Maria, has done an incredible job of embedding co-creation throughout their community. She ran a series of monthly workshops with all of the customers of this tech tool to co-create the community guidelines, the values, the meetups, the topics, everything that they did all together. And how does that increase engagement? Well, you are actually getting the input of the members throughout the entire journey. You're increasing their likelihood to care about what you're doing. You're increasing the buy-in, and they get excited when they see it's launched because they've had a part in it. Think about member roles. How can you champion the engaged members of the community to help you re-engage the disengaged members of your community? I would really strongly encourage you to think about spending your time engaging those really engaged members to then go out together and help the more disengaged members really make value of the community. So what I mean by that, David Perel, he's the founder of Rite of Passage. And they have done this so well because they run a cohort-based program and they've gone back to their alumni from previous cohorts to champion them as alumni mentors, alumni editors, to really drive value for the rest of the new members. Bryony Cole, she's the founder of Sex Tech School, helping people break into the sex tech industry. And she has done a phenomenal job to engage members, to run happy hours and breakfast clubs, to make sure that they are also rallying for new members to join. Rituals. This is what makes communities so weird, wacky, and wonderful. Rituals are such a beautiful way to engage members because they know they're coming, they know they're special, and it's what makes your community unique. Think about Airtree. It's a venture capital firm in Australia. They run a program called Explorers to help people become angel investors. And they have this beautiful ritual at the end of every program. They take a group photo, they share it with everyone, and they encourage everyone to share it across socials, engage with other members, congratulate them for ending, and also to stay on in the community and encourage new members to join. Surprise and delight. This is a great way to value the incredible behaviors that you want to see more of in the community. Imagine a photo of Gary Williams here with a tractor Lego set. I'm really encouraging you to use your imagination because he incorporates surprise and delight so well. He basically goes out to a Lego store and buys a tractor Lego set and gives it to any new member that joins the community, which is such a beautiful surprise and delight moment. And they can build this Lego set and be reminded to engage in that community later on. Gamification, definitely not a new tactic, but one that we can keep coming back to. This is really about making sure that there are incentives and using technology to make engagement fun. Kayla Itsinis, she's built one of the world's largest fitness communities and has gamified working out in an app, which makes it that much more fun. The third last tactic is thinking about scarcity and timing. You know, if you do have that always on offering, how can you build in scarcity and time-bound elements to make people feel accountable and driven to take advantage of the community? Ruben Williams has done this so well. They used to have an always-on membership where people could join at any time, any day, and they started doing gated onboarding. So it was only every quarter that you could join, and they saw a massive increase of new members joining, but also existing members renewing and engaging in their community because they didn't want to wait 3 months. Rewards and incentives. You know, you want to make sure that you are acknowledging members for the incredible work that they are doing, to make sure that you are also incentivizing them to do more of this great engagement. And what that could look like is basically thinking about how can you bring rewards into your community? So at the community cohort, we have a program, and for everyone that submits a community strategy template to get reviewed by our team of alumni editors, we send them a book. And the book that was so beautifully put on that slide is called Cult Status. And this isn't about teaching people how to build cults. It's a book about building a business with a cult-like following. Okay, we've made it to the very last one, which is about voting. How can you encourage your members to continue co-creating and engaging in the content and to actually vote for the incentives? One Roof community does this so well by actually gauging all of the topics that members could share their knowledge on. They put all the topic lists out to the members and you vote on what you want to see. And then they publish the top rated topics in their 2024 calendar, which increases the likelihood to engage because now I know what's coming. If I submitted something, I've got to be a member so I can deliver on it. And it's also a way of really making sure that every content and experience is relevant to the members. And how I want to wrap up with you today is, you know, whether you are a 5 out of 5 on that engagement scale or you are a 0 out of 5 on that engagement scale in your community, perhaps you don't even run a community, just remember that we are doing our best out there. It's a rewarding role, but it can be challenging. And so whenever you make decisions, just remember that always ask for feedback. Thank you so much.